Good afternoon or good evening, depending where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grayson. This is the KMG show for Thursday, May the 26th, 2022. I thought I would begin today by talking about Black fragility. Oh, no, it's white people who are fragile. Really? Is it? That's not the evidence that I glean. We'll start with this. This is from Bounding into Comics, John Del Arraz. Novelist Mercedes Lackey accused of racism banned from Nebula Awards. The Science Fiction Writers of America banned New York Times bestselling author Mercedes Lackey from their 2022 Nebula Awards conference for alleged racist remarks. The Nebula Awards was once considered the second most prestigious award for science fiction writers. In recent years, the awards have become known for controversies over identity politics. Many fans perceive award winners to be chosen on the basis of race or gender rather than the contents of their work. And there is a screenshot here from the Nebula Awards site. Congratulations to SFWA's newest Grandmaster, Mercedes Lackey. The 38th SFWA Damon Knight Memorial Grand Master will be inducted at the 57th Nebula Conference and Awards. There's a picture of an old woman wearing what appears to be some sort of wizard hat with several amulets around her neck. Lackey's banning comes just a year after she won SFWA's Grandmaster Lifetime Achievement Award. Lackey, 72 years old, has published more than 140 books, and the organization praised her contributions to science fiction and fantasy. SFWA President Jeffy, Jeffe, said of her career, quote, "From the time I read my first Mercedes Lackey book as a young woman, her stories have illuminated my imagination and brought joy to my life. With multi-layered fantasy worlds, canny magical systems, and characters who step off the page as living, breathing people, Lackey's books have made an enormous impact on the genre. She gave me warrior women I could believe in, magic-wielding queer heroes, and characters who suffered, then overcame their physical and emotional traumas. Lackey continues to have a lasting influence on my own work, and I'm beyond thrilled to see her honored as SFWA's newest Grandmaster," unquote. Less than 1 year later, SFWA banned Mercedes Lackey under Kennedy's leadership. The organization disavowed her allegedly racially insensitive comments. SFWA stated, "We learned yesterday that while participating in the romancing sci-fi and fantasy panel, Mercedes used a racial slur." The organization's board of directors continued, "First, we apologize to our attendees and the other panelists who were subjected to that slur. We've disabled access to the panel to avoid any additional harm being caused." From there, they stated, "Second, we are immediately removing Mercedes Lackey from the conference and the additional panel she was scheduled for in accordance with SFWA's moderation policy. The use of a racial slur violates the instruction to respect all cultures and communities. Do not make derogatory or offensive statements, even as a joke. That applies to everyone in SFWA space at all levels of their career," the board of directors explained. Yes, I understand that there's all levels. There are many levels of racial slurs. I don't know. Some people of Irish descent become very upset when they're called mix, to give one example, or paddies. Doesn't bother me in the slightest. But back to the story. This year's Nebula Awards conference already has soured many science fiction writers and fans as the organization continued its COVID-19 lockdown policies of having the conference be online only. These are the people who want to storm the stars, and they're afraid of a relatively mild respiratory illness. SFWA charged $150 for tickets to what some science fiction fans are calling a few Zoom calls and a Discord chat. That's the future, isn't it? That's the future of humanity. A few Zoom calls and a Discord chat. Lackey was slated as one of the major draws of the conference, speaking on several panels, romancing sci-fi and fantasy, became embroiled in controversy by her statements, even though Lackey dedicates much of her social media presence to promoting minorities and alphabet people causes. Could we just get to the point where the horrible thing that she said? Back in 2021, she tweeted, "Before all else, trans women are women and trans men are men. This is something I fiercely believe and will always support. I have made awkward statements that have caused pain or distress. My desire is and has always been to support the trans community and be the best ally I can. I regret that I communicated poorly and fell short of the mark. I'm affirming here that I do and always will support trans rights and trans people, and individuals' pronouns are every bit as valid and far more important than the dictates of copy editors in the commercial publishing industry," unquote. Attendees stated Mercedes Lackey referred to controversial author Samuel Delany, infamously known for his praise of NAMBLA, that's the North American Man-Boy Love Association, as a colored writer. Lackey allegedly used the term colored during the panel several times. Multiple science fiction and fantasy writers have taken to Twitter to condemn her, including author not Jennifer, but Jen Brown, who was on the panel. And I'll get to Jen Brown's mental collapse a little later. Fans of Lackey defended the author, saying she meant to say person of color instead of colored person, a distinction that seems minor. Indeed, it does. Lackey's husband, Larry Dixon, also confirmed she used the word colored. He wrote on Twitter, additionally, an official statement was shotgunned out from the SFWA board members, apparently to everyone on SFWA's mailing list, that Mercedes Lackey used a racial slur. She said colored during a multiracial panel, the same word the NAACP uses. Actually, I don't believe that they use it anymore. Just as NARAL used to be the National Abortion Rights Action League, but is just now NARAL. The NAACP used to be the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. It's just NAACP now. Let's not lift up that rock. Oh, by the way, Larry Dixon calls himself the Griffon King. Yes, because of course. And there is the transgender flag. You may have noticed the transgender flag. They added brown and black to it, along with various trans stuff. And then the blue and yellow of the Ukrainian flag, such that the original rainbow is disappearing quite quickly. In a 16-tweet thread, Dixon would detail that Lackey is shivering, crying uncontrollably. He tweeted, "She is horrified by this. She is shivering, crying uncontrollably. Since she was a teen, she fought for civil rights, gay rights, trans rights. As a teen?" When would that have been? 50, 60 years ago? Her work is about inclusivity and consideration for others. Oh, I thought it was art. She was just done wrong in a devastating way. In another tweet, he wrote that those attacking Lackey are committing evil. Obviously, the wording was a mistake, but the reasons don't matter. The person doesn't matter. What matters to the mob is that there's someone to savage, and righteously doing so, you're doing evil. Back off on the teaching and finger shaking, or as Jack Donaghy called it, power wagging. Delaney himself seems to have no problem with Lackey's comments, posting to Facebook, "Colored ladies was what my aunts Bessie and Sadie referred to themselves as, and I favored black with a small b because of my experiences in 1968 with the activists who changed the country from Negro to Dr. Du Bois's preferred term." That would be W.E.B. Du Bois. Well, no, that's not what happened. What happened in the 60s was that, Negro had been replaced by colored. Colored was considered less offensive, not that there's anything offensive at all about Negro, which was replaced by Afro-American. You can look this up if you don't believe me. And then for some reason, it was decided that Afro-American wasn't cutting it, so it was changed to black. But then the term African-American came roaring up and is now, I believe, the preferred term. But there's also persons of color, which, since there are many other colors besides white and black, It seems, as the kids like to say, problematic. Delaney continued, among colored or black or Negro folks, he had no problem, since scientifically there is no such thing as race. The terms are all social constructs. Then why do you keep going on about it? With all due respect to anyone over 60, there are no bad words. It depends alone on the vernacular you are brought up with. Perspective, usage, and grammar stars out as a lost cause, unquote. Okay. Even though the person referred to isn't offended by her statement, dozens of authors and fans continue to post stating Lackey caused immeasurable harm by referring to Delaney as a colored author. You see what I mean by black fragility? Immeasurable harm. I know that there are many people who, to this day, say that I'm English. I'm not English. There's not a single drop of blood of English in me, but I don't fly off the handle, start tearing out my hair, and burst into hysterical tears when someone misidentifies me in that way. Oh, so sensitive. And Stagg wrote, you don't get to decide what is a harmful slur to a marginalized community. If you want part of that community, white folks defending Mercedes Lackey, I'm looking right at you. When black people tell you a word is harmful and hurtful, stop saying it. Twitter user Mary Sue says, Mercedes Lackey is super reliant on the magical native trope and other racist nonsense, so I'm neither surprised nor hurt by finding out she's still racist in 2022. But if you are white, surprised, and hurt, that's a goddamn you problem. And if you aren't hurt, you problem. I looked up Mary Sue says, and she is a morbidly obese woman who identifies as, she calls herself Mary Boo on Twitter. Oh, I see that I'm blocked. Never mind. She identifies, there's all these rainbow flags and transgender flags on her banner on Twitter, which is as one would expect. What do you make of SFWA banning Mercedes Lackey for saying colored person instead of person of color? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below or on social media. Yeah, okay, lots of comments. Oh dear. Oh dear. The pain of the pain. Vox Day responded briefly. Ironically, she's being banned for calling Samuel K. Delaney a colored person and not a gay black pedophile who writes pornography badly. The sci-fi fantasy community is rife with all manner of paraphilia. I'm sure there's lots of normal people who consider themselves part of this community, but there are an awful lot of strange and depraved people, both writing this stuff and reading this stuff. So let's go to the aforementioned Jen, not Jennifer, but Jen Brown, described in her Twitter bio as she, her, by Black librarian and one of We Hear Space's admins, Ignite Award nominated SFF author, Words in FIA, I don't know what that is, Tor.com, Baffling Magazine, and more. And she's very upset. She is very, very, very upset by this whole affair. Oh, I'll just interject. She retweeted someone called Min Jin Lee, who's a National Book Award finalist. Ooh, Guggenheim and Radcliffe Fellow. He says, our bodies are not designed to absorb and process this much violence, loss, and grief. She's referring to the mass shooting in Texas where 19 children and 2 adults were murdered. Do you know these people, Min Jin Lee? Do you live there or near there? If our bodies are not designed to absorb and process this much violence, loss, and grief, Min Jin Lee is going to have a tough time in the future. I would say the near future, actually. Occasionally, I find myself going down rabbit holes on Black Twitter or trans Twitter, and one just has to gasp at the insanity. Well, maybe that's not quite the right word. These people are living in an entirely different world. It seems a world which is entirely divorced from reality. Well, here's Jen, not Jennifer, but Jen Brown. Whelp. Bots are now calling me the N word in DMs. Point is, language matters. The line from accidentally calling black folks colored to being targeted by racist harassers is an effing circle. Anyway, I'm closing DMs. Time to protect what's left of my energy for you, actually writing dope ass stories I hope folks want to read with black characters living their best lives. Oh, did nothing bad happen to these black characters living their best lives? Online after a break from yesterday's foolishness, and I'm really floored. Thanks, y'all, for every kind word you've extended. Trust, I see and appreciate y'all endlessly for it. So, the romancing sci-fi and fantasy panel wrapped. Instead of celebrating, I'm here holding grief and frustration over what happens when language is misused, regardless of intent. I was the only black panelist. I'm a newer author without many publishing credits. I'm in my early 30s and was referred to as young during the panel. That's fine. I am young. Those aren't excuses, but they are illustrative of the power differentials at play at science fiction and fantasy. Now, though, I need to warn folks, please take care if you plan on watching our panel. Some wonderful wisdoms were shared, but you're going to encounter that moment and the silence might be suffocating. Oh my God. These people are simply too precious to live. Jason Buford writes at hellgatenyc.com, power racism and kosher hot dogs, Yankee Stadium in 2022. To love baseball is to be annoyed or even dismayed by its whiteness. Boo! Whiteness. Well, here's what happened. Black people in America used to love baseball. And after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, you had all these great black baseball players. Going back about 20 years ago or so, it seemed that black Americans decided they didn't really like baseball that much. They liked first basketball and then football. They didn't really like to watch baseball, and they didn't like to play it. And that's fine. Black people are not obligated to love baseball or anything else. But the fact that not very many black athletes in America, certainly nowhere, no way as much as previously, want to play baseball is somehow Major League Baseball's fault, and it's somehow white America's fault. And of course, Major League Baseball is just bending over backwards. Please, 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 young black athletes, consider baseball. Well, they would be wise to consider baseball, because baseball is a game where you're, unlike football, where you're not risking crippling injuries. We give an example. If you're a good fielder and maybe you don't really have any bat, good glove, no bat, as they say. If you're dependable in the field, you can find yourself playing well into your 30s, even after 35, earning a few $1 million a year for playing not that many innings in the year. Sounds pretty good, right? Anyway, Jason Buford begins, you never know who you're going to talk to when you're walking to your seats at the Yankees game. You just let the conversation come to you. I don't think Donaldson should have been suspended. That's Josh Donaldson. A man with a chin-strap mustache looking like a lone survivor extra told me he was not a fan of Josh Donaldson's spurious one-game suspension for Major League Baseball. Donaldson, who looks like what you'd find in the dictionary under prototypical asshole bass player, told White Sox outfielder Tim Anderson, a black man, "What's up, Jackie?" last Saturday in a win against the White Sox at Yankee Stadium. The lone survivor extra explained that in an interview 2 years ago, Anderson called himself the new Jackie Robinson. In that sense, Chinstrap went on, Donaldson was just talking shit. Everyone is sensitive. Donaldson claims it was all in jest, but one look at Donaldson and his track record of beefing with everyone who might have their head screwed on straight belies any non-confrontational intent. Now, do we want to talk about confrontational black baseball players? No. Even Aaron Judge, who's trying to steer far, far away from controversy as he navigates towards possibly the biggest major league payday ever, thought Donaldson went too far. At last night's game against the doormat Baltimore Orioles, Donaldson was on Yankee fans' minds. On the Metro North train, Luke, 15, told me he felt that Donaldson said something racist despite the context, and it was right to suspend him. Luke, spelled in the French way, L-U-C, showed me that the kids might be all right after all. Yeah, let's gang up on the white guy. So if you're a white person who gangs up on the white people, that means that you're okay in Jason Buford's book. But wait, there's more. Here we go. This is from TMZ Sports. Breaking news. The Yankees' third baseman Josh Donaldson is issuing yet another mea culpa, this time apologizing to Jackie Robinson's family for any issues he may have caused them following his controversy with Tim Anderson. As we previously noted, Donaldson was suspended one game by Major League Baseball for calling Anderson Jackie multiple times during Yankees' tilt with the White Sox this past weekend. Donaldson said he intended the remark to be in jest, saying he thought it was an inside joke he had with Anderson stemming from comments that the Chicago shortstop made in a 2019 interview. Anderson, though, said he found it very offensive, and Donaldson later said that he was sorry for it all. Donaldson said, "I would like also to apologize to Mrs. Rachel Robinson and the Jackie Robinson family for any distress this incident might have caused. Jackie was a true American hero, and I hold his name in the highest regard." Okay. To explain again, Donaldson and others were irked when Tim Anderson called himself the new Jackie Robinson. This was a rookie. Again, you don't do that sort of thing in baseball. Baseball, again, is not a game where you get selected in the first round and you start prancing around in the field like in football or basketball. Baseball is a game where you typically spend years in the minors or in college. You have to prove yourself. Jackie Robinson is in the Hall of Fame. And as I said the other day, it would be as if Josh Donaldson, starting with Oakland years ago, said that he was the new Brooks Robinson, one of the greatest third basemen ever. No, you don't do that in baseball. But now we see that another line has been drawn. And let's go to the chat. Hello to Aaron, Chokin 666. The authority is on the perimeter, indeed. Hello to Dan and Dan Ellison. David the Gnome says they secured the perimeter. They certainly did that. David the Gnome says they even tased a few parents for good measure in furtherance of perimeter security. Dionysus says, looks like Nick Fuentes is hitting the floor hard. Even BAP is going after him, Bronze Age pervert. This NB walks his dog, wears a different wizard hat every day, says Joker 666. And hello to Quachalongo, who says, funny thing is that 25% of Uvalde's police force is SWAT. Going to ask for more funding. Yes, indeed. And hello to a respectable commenting name and strategically adaptive memeplex. Hello to John S. What are the citizens going to do about it? Asks respectable commenting name. Secure that perimeter around the station from outside backup while an active shooter goes through the station? Well, we'll talk about that in a little while. David the Gnome says, I don't know, but when your kid is dead and there's a lot of you in this position, I imagine things get pretty heated. Oh, to Paula Berlinski, who says, let's make the next Black History Month the best Black History Month in the history of Black History Month, or die trying. Hello to Gamian and V Who. And do we have anyone new here? Gamian says, Mark Dice talked about Black fragility in his latest video. Glad people are becoming open about being sick of it. Yes, got to conserve one's energy lest one be exhausted. I guess it's very exhausting. People constantly groveling to you, kowtowing to you. Oh, Do you have a list of words that we shouldn't mention today or ever, perhaps? How may we accommodate you? And Samuel Delaney, ugh, says Earl Pipe. Indeed, indeed. Paula Berlinski quotes Bill Clinton, "We will meet these challenges not through big government. The era of big government is over." But we can't go back to a time when our citizens were just left to fend for themselves. Hello to Birkin Sultanov. Our bodies, says Earl Pipe. Yeah, okay. They meme this into existence. You don't talk about yourself or, as a person or a human being. You talk about your body, which I think it was explained to me once why this form is used. But again, as I was saying last week about environmental racism, this has been explained to me several times, but my brain keeps rejecting it, like a transplanted organ that doesn't take. My brain is trying to protect me. Thank you, brain. Birkin Sultanov says, Ameriqua has become a woke concentration camp. Hello to Throwaway Shill. Well, thank you for your kind words. Metal Mike says, we lost Ray Liotta and Andy Fletcher today. Are they dropping from the jab? Could be. Could be. I don't know much about Andy Fletcher's personal life. He was a member of Depeche Mode. He didn't, unlike the singer of Depeche Mode, he didn't seem like the kind of person who would drink himself to death or drug himself to death. But of course, as I say, I don't know much about him. Monkeypox has been a pandemic for a long time now, says Gamion. Strategic Adaptive Memeplex says, you'll live in a rabbit hole and you'll be happy. And anybody new? Oh, Alan White of Yes, too? Really? Well. Sorry to hear that. Alan White replaced Bill Bruford as Yes's drummer. He had previously drummed with John Lennon's band. Jogokin666 says, a lot of Dominicans are black and they love baseball. Indeed they do. Indeed they do. But as I previously explained, apparently it is believed that, Major League Baseball is increasingly dominated by Caribbean players, but they're not really black. Well, actually, most of them are blacker than most American blacks. Yeah, but they're not American blacks. They're not descendant of American slaves. Okay, and again, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. It's all so tiresome. Hello to Buddy, who says no baseball tonight. Don Willis, hello, says NPR had a story about mass school shootings and mentioned unreported mass school shootings, huh? You can't make this up. Yeah, this happened, about 3 years ago? Some crazy kid came in and killed 11 people, and nobody really paid much attention to it. It wasn't like the number one story in the nation or anything like that, really. I'm not sure Jackie Robinson has Hall of Fame worthy numbers, says Buddy. Yeah. He was, he played for 10 years, and his wins above replacement was something like 66, which is outstanding. Of course, you could make the same claim against Sandy Koufax, I suppose. He didn't play all that long. Okay, who else do we have here? Oh, thank you, KMG's brain, indeed, says Gamion. Oh, do the Chinese really watch the NBA? Seems so weird, says True Greenbeard. Presumably. Kevin, opinion on sabermetrics, asks Halper. Well, I'm a fan of sabermetrics, actually. The traditional way of looking at baseball stats dramatically underplayed the importance of getting on base. Getting on base through walks, getting on base by hit by pitch, getting on base by error, etc. And it's brought back, it gives us a better understanding of what's important in baseball, which is getting on base. Plastic Ono Band, says Joaquin 666. Yes, exactly. But he says a lot of second basemen had better numbers, frankly. Baseball nerds are rethinking WAR as all it's cracked up to be. Well, there's all these different flavors of WAR, actually, and it's kind of hard to keep up. John Lennon said, according to Polo Berlinski, we're trying to sell peace like a product, and sell it like people sell soap or soft drinks. Yeah, okay. This was an IRA supporter, and he donated money or some money to Michael X, the murderous black terrorist fantasist. So his assassination could be regarded as, I don't know, to use a Leninism, instant karma. Of course, that guy was all over the place. All over the place. It seems that when Hollywood trots out a new production, which they've pretty much determined is going to bomb, you white people are to blame. And the fans are to blame. Just ripping your fans. These are the people who go to your movies 5, 10 times. And yeah, let's kick those guys. What's the worst that could happen? This is from Anthony Lund at movieweb.com. Obi-Wan Kenobi star Moses Ingram becomes one of the first black women. Why would you name a woman Moses? Apart from the fact that Moses is a man's name, Moses is one of the most famous men who ever lived. One of the first black women to have a prominent role in the Star Wars franchise, as she appears as Reva, the third sister of the Inquisitors. Star Wars is so stupid. In the Ewan McGregor-led series, which arrives on Disney Plus this Friday. However, before taking on the role, the actress says she was told by Lucasfilm to expect a certain amount of racial backlash from fans, in scare quotes, on social media, similar to some toxic comments made about the latest Star Wars movie. Oh, that Vietnamese woman was dumpy and not very attractive and couldn't act, and that black fellow whose name escapes me was not at all charismatic and, well, couldn't act. In Obi-Wan Kenobi, we will see Ewan McGregor's Jedi Master living in exile on Tatooine, where he keeps an eye on a 10-year-old Luke Skywalker. Kenobi will find himself being hunted by the Inquisitors, an order of Sith warriors who have been given the task of hunting down the remaining members of the Jedi Order. How many times are they going to run through this? Oh, there's only a few of us left, and they're hunting us down to the last man. How many times are they going to do this? They've been given the task, yes. The members of the Jedi are by Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine. While there are many fans eagerly awaiting the newest addition to the Star Wars franchise, there have been a number of incidents of unwarranted toxicity towards some of its biggest stars in recent years. Biggest stars? Really? Oh, Hayden Christensen is mentioned. There's a white man who can't act. I saw one of the movies that he was in, and I was just stunned. Who would cast this man? Whether it is the hate aimed at Ahmed Best for bringing Jar Jar Binks to life in The Phantom Menace, I think that most of that hate was directed at George Lucas, actually. Dissatisfaction with Hayden Christensen's debut as Anakin Skywalker. He can't act. Criticism of female lead and black stormtrooper with Rey and Finn, respectively, in The Force Awakens, or the abuse of Kelly Marie Tran online to the point where she closed down her social media accounts following the release of The Last Jedi, in which she played Rose Tico. She doesn't make those decisions. Her management or Disney is responsible for this. Star Wars has seen a lot of fan toxicity over the years. It is therefore not surprising that Lucasfilm wanted to pre-warn their star of the potential challenges she could face. Do you know that in 1961, when Roger Maris looked like that he was going to eclipse Babe Ruth's record of 60 home runs in a season, he got constant death threats from Yankees fans, from Babe Ruth fans? Yes. Fame attracts insanity, and that's across the board. And it doesn't matter what color you are. However, as Ingram stated in the same interview, Obi-Wan Kenobi is a massively diverse entry in the Star Wars franchise, something that she believes has been a long time coming. She said, Obi-Wan is going to bring the most diversity I think we've ever seen in the galaxy before. To me, it's long overdue. If you've got talking droids and aliens, but no people of color, it doesn't make any sense. They had prominent people of color in Star Wars, starting from the second movie with Billy D. Williams. It's 2022, you know. Is it? Checks calendar. Yes, she's right. So we're just at the beginning of that change. Oh, don't tell me that. We're just at the beginning. But I think to start that change is better than never having started it. Oy Gewalt. And Jussie Smollett, he's back. This is from Paul Chavez at the Daily Mail. Jussie Smollett to make post-scandal directorial debut with B-Boy Blues, coming soon to BET Plus. Wait, there's a BET Plus now? It will be the first project for the 39-year-old actor since being found guilty in December 2021 of charges stemming from a fake hate crime against himself. Mona Scott Young, 55, and her Monami Entertainment has joined the film as a producer and was a key figure in the BET Plus deal, according to an article in Variety. Smollett was sentenced in March to 150 days in county jail after being convicted on felony charges over the January 2019 hate crime hoax in Chicago. He served only 6 days in jail before he was released on bond pending the outcome of the appeal of his conviction. B-Boy Blues will debut on June 9th on the BET streaming service. This story in the Mail is very confusing because has anyone seen this movie? Has it been shown anywhere? It seems to be unclear. Guess what this movie is about? B-Boy Blues is a film adaptation of the James Earl Hardy novel and stars Timothy Richardson, Ladisi, Brandy Evans, Heather B., Marquise Wilson, Jabari Red, Broderick Hunter, and Thomas Mackie. Quote, through our content slate, we are intentional about representing the fullness of the Black experience, including that of the alphabet people community, said BET Plus executive Devin Griffin. B-Boy Blues is an artful, heartrending film about the complexity of love, something we can all relate to. Smollett, in addition to directing, also wrote the script to B-Boy Blues with novelist Hardy, a 66, naked gay black men. Wasn't there this movie, it was called Midnight or something, that nobody saw, and it was about the troubled and sensitive lives of underage black homosexual males? Didn't it win the Oscar for Best Picture a few years ago? Does anyone ever talk about that film? The film's official synopsis reads, class and culture clash when a college-educated journalist from Brooklyn and a homeboy bike messenger from Harlem fall in love. Bike messengers? There are still bike messengers? When was this novel written? When was this novel written? Scott Young said in a statement, B-Boy Blues is a beautifully bold, funny, heartwarming bromance. That's not really what bromance means, but never mind. And I was thrilled to partner with Jussie to help this wonderful film gain greater exposure. Falling head over heels and fighting for love are universal emotions and experiences, and we are so grateful to BET for shining a powerful spotlight on the still seriously underrepresented Black alphabet people community and bringing this impactful love story to an even greater audience. Just belt up. I mentioned this Midnight film or whatever it's called. You heard of RuPaul's Drag Race? And what's that guy, that rapper that had the country crossover hit where he's giving a lap dance to the devil? Black culture is in the United States is in danger of being entirely consumed by homosexuality. And I am not exaggerating. Oh, but there isn't enough. There isn't enough. Well, I suppose there'll never be enough until it's just assumed reflexively that all Black Americans are alphabet people. Oh, update. Remember the tragic death of football player Dwayne Haskins? Well, this story is as dumb as you might expect. This is from TMZ Sports. Investigators are revealing more details surrounding Dwayne Haskins' death, saying in reports released Monday that the quarterback drank heavily and ingested ketamine in the hours leading up to his passing. Yeah, being run over by a dump truck. Passing is not the word I would use. And also had a blood alcohol level of 0.24 at the time of the April 9th accident. When your blood alcohol level gets up to 0.24, if you're able to put one foot in front of the other and walk, you should get the Orson Welles clap. According to a Broward County Medical Examiner's Office investigation report, a rep for the Steelers told investigators Haskins had trained with teammates in the Miami area all day on April the 8th before eventually heading to a club in the evening with a, quote, friend/cousin. In the documents, investigators say the rep told them Haskins drank heavily and then got into a fight. Hours later, Haskins was found on a Florida highway after being struck by a dump truck. Investigators say at the scene they found Haskins' vehicle and a described as female companion inside of it. The investigator said the woman told them Haskins had left the car on foot to try to find a gas station. The woman's relationship with Haskins was not disclosed in the documents. He crossed an interstate highway. What was it, like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning? The mind boggles. And then we see his wife, Calabria, Klabrya, has an enormous tattoo on her arm of this fellow. Seems he was cheating on her, but never mind. He's got a big smile on his face and his eyes are closed. And he's got a whole bunch of medallions, including a big K. For Special K? Perhaps. And, speaking of Black American culture being subsumed by the alphabet people, this is from Alex Nitzberg at The Blaze. Mattel releases Barbie doll based on transgender actor Laverne Cox. We are proud to highlight the importance of inclusion and acceptance at every age. Okay, groomers. According to Cox's biography on Twitter, Cox is a 4-time Emmy-nominated actress and Emmy-winning producer. What excites me most about her being out in the world is that trans young people can see her. Trans young people. Yes. Fury intensifying. And maybe get to purchase her. Oh, it's very transactional, isn't it? And play with her and know that there's a Barbie made by Mattel for the first time in the likeness of a trans person. People magazine reported that Cox noted being very involved in designing the doll. I was like, can we make her look more like me and more African American? And we had a conversation about highlights and lowlights because I'm blonde most of the time now, but I'm a black girl, so I need a dark root. And we had a whole conversation about how they can't do that, but they could do dark low lights. I promise I'm not making what follows up. As a child, Cox wanted to play with Barbie dolls, but was not allowed to do so. But later in life, at the recommendation of a therapist, Cox purchased a Barbie as an adult. I begged my mother for a Barbie doll, and she said no because I was assigned male at birth, Cox said. And when I was in my 30s, I was in therapy and telling my therapist that I was denied the opportunity to play with Barbie dolls. And my therapist said, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. Really? And what you should do for your inner child, did they still say that, is go out and buy yourself a Barbie doll. I played with my Barbie, and I told my mom what my therapist had said. And that first Christmas after that, my mom sent me a Barbie doll. And she's been sending me Barbies for Christmas and for my birthday. It's a Christmas trans miracle. And, okay, let's dive into the darkness here. We got the segue with Laverne Cox. This is from the Stars News Network. Trans queer Minneapolis preschool teacher experiences gender euphoria moments when children affirm their identity. See, this is assigned at birth as a woman who then became a man and got the beard, but not just the beard. We're going to grow the beard a little out here, and then we're going to tie it up so it sticks out. How very manly. A Minneapolis preschool teacher who instructs 3-year-olds describes themselves as, quote, a bratty queer slut here to make other queer sluts happy, unquote, is generating waves of controversy online. The teacher, Misha, again with these names, Misha is of course a diminutive used by Russians for the name Mikhail or Michael. Goes by Lost Mer Creature and Queer Honey Bear on TikTok, where they post content about being an educator and their trans/queer sex life. Misha also posts about their hatred of capitalism and private schools, despite admitting they work at a private Montessori school. I know a little bit about Montessori schools. Who goes to Montessori schools? Your parents are wealthy. One video reposted to Twitter by Libs of TikTok shows Misha describing the happy gender euphoria moments they experience when students affirm their trans queer identity. Oh, 3-year-olds. Again, rage intensifying, and why isn't this person in prison? Misha says they were hired by their current Minneapolis employer without an in-person interview. You're going to hire a teacher without an in-person interview? And now enjoys flaunting their sexuality, boasting about how they skirt dress code rules. Your idea of professionalism is BS, the teacher wrote. And this was followed. Okay, this is obviously an Instagram post. Your idea of professionalism is BS was followed by a bunch of hashtags, and I'll run them down for you. Transgender, trans, genderqueer, non-binary, agender, gender fluid, queer, NB, queer, bi, bisexual, gay, lesbian, queer babe, fat, plus size, fat babe, body acceptance, bipolar, mental health, depression, anxiety, podcaster, podcast teacher, educator. Despite Nisha's flirtation with social norms, who writes these stories? Someone has a flirtation with social norms? They do clarify that they're aiming for an aesthetic that says, you can trust me with your kids. Very definitely. No question about that. In other posts, the teacher talks explicitly about their sex life and gender identity. For example, they asked for a snarky bisexual switch for Christmas. Switch is a term for somebody who enjoys playing both the dominant and submissive roles in a BDSM relationship. Misha also posts about their mental illness, chronicling what they call, quote, small depression victories, unquote, such as getting dressed, taking their meds, and eating breakfast. Someday a real rain will come. This is from Jessica Warren and Katie Fian at Mail Online. Father of two, 29, is pictured with his Ukrainian refugee girlfriend. Security guard embraces lover after dumping his partner of 10 years after 22-year-old came to live with them when she fled war-torn I can't pronounce that. I'm just going to call it Lemberg, okay? Yeah, let's invite a single 22-year-old woman in a strange country to live with us. To live with a male-female couple. I mean, that couldn't possibly go wrong. Tony Garnett and his partner Lorna took in Sophia Karkadim at the start of May. Sophia and Tony grew close, despite Lorna and Tony sharing 10-year relationship. Tony has since insisted that he has fallen in love with the 22-year-old from Lemberg. Lorna says she believes Sophia decided she wanted Tony since she arrived in the UK. Security guard Tony Garnett, oh, he's a security guard, can be seen embracing his lover, Sophia Karkadim, after she moved into the long-term couple's home for 10 days, having fled Lemberg. Garnett, who lives in Bradford, West Yorkshire, said he has fallen in love with Sophia and wants to spend the rest of his life with her. I'm sure that's probably what he told his lover of 10 years. And Sophia, and for some reason in this story is spelt with two I's, stop gaslighting us, who fled the city in western Ukraine, said she fancied Tony as soon as she saw him, and that the pair are living their very own love story. The new couple are now living with Tony's mother and father, although they are looking at properties to move into. And there's a picture of a security guard, Tony Garnett. He's got sleeve tattoos on both arms, including his hands and fingers. He not only has tattoos on his neck, of course, that's nothing now. He has two tattoos on his face. Okay. And we learn from this that Sophia is what you might call thirsty. She takes a lot of selfies and posts them to Instagram. So watch out, English ladies. The Ukrainians are coming for your man. And okay, let's go to Moon of Alabama to get something new about the Ukraine. Hang on just a second here. And there we go. This is moonofalabama.org. Okay, we talked about the Telegram rumors that make no sense. Ukraine open thread. I don't want to talk about an open thread. Could be anybody. Could be anyone on these open threads. Let's go to Pedro Gonzalez's Twitter feed. Are we bored with the Ukraine yet? I'm kind of getting that impression. Again, this is the internet age, the social media age. And it's like, oh, you know that horrible thing that happened? That just shocking, indescribable thing that happened? Oh, 3 days ago. We're so bored with it. Pedro Gonzalez tweets, National Review sees in Ukraine one last opportunity for a return to its Cold War glory days and a chance to attack the populists who have stolen its thunder. It stands against the American interest in the process. Sagar Anjeti had tweeted, a Uvalde mother was placed in handcuffs by federal marshals on scene for attempting to enter the school to get her child. Another man was tased for trying to get his kid off a bus, all while Salvador Ramos was alive inside killing kids. Gonzalez comments, anarcho-tyranny. Indeed, this was a phrase coined by the late, great Samuel Francis. Andy Specht had tweeted, cops stood outside the school while the killer rampaged inside. Onlookers yelled at them to go in. They didn't. One parent urged bystanders, let's just rush in because the cops aren't doing anything like they're supposed to. Yes, Gonzalez comments, you don't need guns. That's what the police are for. He continues, hard to put into words that that don't get you on a watch list how to feel about cops pinning parents to the ground who want to help their kids during a shooting while these same cops mill around outside in tactical gear doing nothing except policing parents. Oh, they're doing more than that. They are securing the perimeter. Let's thinking about the time cops in Texas arrested a group of armed civilians and a bar owner who refused to close her business in 2020 under Governor Abbott's COVID mandate. Oh, AOC has she has a very spicy take on what happened in Texas, and I'm sure you'll be, you'll do a 180. You'll do a 180. Chris Menahan at Information Liberation. Police are taking heat for allegedly taking too long to kill the gunman who stormed Robb Elementary School in Uvalde. Yeah, what can anything good come of something like this? No, but perhaps the idea of securing the perimeter, that more and more people, this has been known, as I pointed out, since Columbine. And I read the reports and I was just appalled. What do they pay policemen for? To sit and wait outside until the killers have expended all their ammunition or killed themselves? Is that what policemen are paid for? Oh, well, going into a school where, confronting an active shooter is dangerous. Yes, it's dangerous. That's why you have the badge and your gun and the license to use it and that big fat pension. But here's some good news. Fareed Zakaria is displeased. You know that big-brained guy at CNN, the plagiarist? He's not very happy with what's happening in re-globalization. This is from CNN Politics. CNN's Fareed Zakaria devoted a portion of his show Sunday to the Biden administration's failure so far to lift the tariffs because it fears the domestic political consequences. He lambasted the White House for behaving like a deer caught in the headlights, paralyzed from fear that any major shift might get attacked by Republicans. Quote, getting cheap stuff at Walmart is a much bigger boon for someone making $30,000 a year rather than $300,000, unquote, Zakaria said. Oh, okay. So Fareed Zakaria is the champion of the working man now. Is he? Is he? This insolent interloper is a champion of American anything? Oh, there's all sorts of cheap tat at Walmart. That's not much use when you don't have a job or your job is minimum wage. In any event, the stuff at Walmart is rubbish. Yeah, hey, look, you can get a pair of jeans for $19. It's a false economy. I've been through this myself. After the third or fourth wash of said jeans, how come there's a hole in the crotch already? I mean, these pants are not going to last for much longer, but, they only cost $19. Zakaria said globalization has actually made life better by making key goods like food, clothing, and technology cheaper and more accessible to more Americans. Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's buy a laptop. Do you know how much more powerful laptops are than they used to be? No, I can't afford a new laptop, because, again, I don't have money and cost of food and all these other things is gone through the roof. I don't really understand why Americans would pay any attention to people. Oh, I've just shown up from the Indian subcontinent, and now I'm going to tell you what's what. And because of my terribly big brain, you have to, because I'm a BIPOC, you must listen to me. There was an election in Australia 5 days ago, and the Liberal National Coalition of Scott Morrison lost to Anthony Albanese of the Labour Party. And an angry woman, an angry Australian woman, has something to say about this. And very amusingly, this is called Samantha Maiden, who is, I gather, a rather big deal in the Australian media. And what's the best way to describe this woman? Truculent. Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe her. It's, oh, you awful men have got what has coming to you. This is from news.com.au. Federal election, how women got Scott Morrison in the end. Scott Morrison didn't always get women, but in the end, they got him. They got him good. I'm surprised she didn't add nya. Women in Western Australia and in Victoria decided they'd had enough of him, and they came for him silently this time. Why is she describing female voters like they're murderers? In pre-polls, in postals, and at the ballot box? Well, how else would they go after him? With knives or guns or blunt instruments? The quiet Australians, indeed. It was grim work, dismantling a government that for many years thought it normal to have a single woman in cabinet, Foreign Minister Julie Bishop. A government where the Prime Minister bullied the Australian Post CEO Christine Holgate into quitting her job. Yes, because she was terrible at it. Who thought it was fine and dandy to humiliate her on the floor of Parliament to score political points, or whoever else he was backgrounding against that day. A government where the Prime Minister was bemused and confused by female anger over sexual violence. Oh, yes. Some woman complains that some years ago or whatever, some man in the government behaved inappropriately, and so this person should be drawn and quartered. Or had to ask his wife Jenny to explain to him how he should respond, or believe that women would forget. On the eve of the election, we learned that he believed that female representation meant picking Catherine Deves, a photogenic political rookie. Yes, well, it's quite significant that she mentions Catherine Deves, Deves. If you look this woman up, you will find that she is a buxom, a blonde with a quite good face. Yes. The ugly hydra of female jealousy. She spent the campaign, this is Catherine Deves, defending range of, again, they don't edit stories anymore. That's not my mistake. It says defending range of offensive social media posts saying trans people are, quote, surgically mutilated. Where's the lie, though? That we've seen any other candidate dumped. Last night it looked like of the 14 seats nationally that had changed hands, 12 have been won by women. But female voters got the job done Saturday night, and they did it systematically across the country. Many of these women had decided that Scott Morrison's time was up a long time ago, if the ALP's political research is any guide. And the reverberations of the political murder, she actually says it, the political murder committed by Australian women will unfold in the Liberal Party for years to come. I don't think that this Samantha Maiden woman should be allowed anywhere near sharp objects. Of course, there were also some high-profile political victims of the case for change that were women too. Female and male voters were not happy with being taken for granted. Do we want to talk about Australia's COVID hysteria? That might have something to do with Morrison losing. Is she going to get into this? In the seat of Fowler, Anthony Albanese's decision to parachute in former New South Wales Premier Christina Keneally was rebuffed by voters in favor of a female independent, Di Lee. Voters told the ALP they didn't want a blow-in and went with a local independent and lived and worked in their community. The other big story of election night was the Greens. For all the talk of the Teals, the Greens picked up 2 seats in Brisbane. Yes, so the Green Party is growing in Australia, a party that wants to destroy the earth. Okay. The Labour Party will have a big task ahead of them managing those pressures in the Senate and the lower house unless they can make it to a majority. But the biggest lesson for the Liberal Party, as one strategist for the Independents told me, the Liberals used a bunch of bland men as facades to cover their incompetence on climate, integrity, and women. After thousands of women marched for justice and against sexual harassment and assault last year, many believed it looked like a political earthquake. The Prime Minister told us that across the world, such protests were made with bullets, which was supposed to be some sort of tone-deaf praise for Australia's democracy. Instead, it just pissed women off. People actually write this now. It pissed women off, and you do not want to piss women off, especially not Samantha Maiden. So she's discussing the defeat of Scott Morrison's government without one mention of the coronavirus, not a single mention of it. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that the Labour Party would have been probably as bad or even worse than the Liberal Party and the national policy, but this is how elections work. Most people don't pay much attention to politics, and the person in power has done something which angers me, so I'll vote for the other guy. Yeah, but the other guy is not really much different, maybe worse. They don't care about that. They just want to punish people for angering them. And what's happened to it? Australia used to be considered one of the manliest countries in the world. Now it appears to be a trembling, a terrified, snarky gynocracy. You may have heard me mention the other day a story about, oh, yes, here's the original version from May the 24th. Justin Trudeau cancels appearance at event in BC after protesters hurl racial slurs. The story never made any sense. This is in Surrey, BC, which is dominated by Sikhs. And the defense minister, Anita Anand, who is a Hindu, she spoke. Apparently, she wasn't worried. But what happened was the CBC rewrote the story because people pointed out this story is obviously bogus. So they rewrote the story to read Trudeau canceled BC appearance after RCMP warned protest could escalate. And Jonathan Kay, Quillette, formerly of the National Post, did some good work on this. And by good work, I mean, noticing embarrassing things. Yes, CBC News had tweeted Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was forced to cancel plans to attend a fundraising dinner in Surrey, BC, Tuesday evening after protesters hurled racial slurs at the mostly South Asian attendees. Given that Sikhs are actually a paramilitary organization, probably not a good idea in such a heavily Sikh place as Surrey, BC, to hurl racial slurs at them. They would be met with fists, at least, and perhaps worse. Jonathan Kay responded, the only slur in this article consists of a guy addressing Trudeau with the words, quote, we don't like the way he's running Canada. Looking forward to the next Canadian Journalizing Society panel discussion on why do those dumb yobs not trust our amazing reporting. So sometime this afternoon, Jonathan Kay points out, the CBC rewrote the story, expanding the first paragraph into 9 paragraphs and also changing the headline and the subhead. But I don't see anything that indicates that all this was rewritten, except for last updated thing at the top. Weirdly, the article now is credited to CBC News instead of the original Canadian Press, though much of it remains a straight-up CP story. At the end, it says, with files from CP, but it's exactly the same web link as the original CP story, with the same photo. Someone pointed out on Twitter that CBC and, well, the Canadian regime media, or temple prostitutes as I call them, really seem to be keen on ginning up a race war in Canada. Oh, these white people, the white supremacists, the white nationalists are looking to genocide you. So I guess you better fight back, right? It's actually the opposite of the truth, but, never mind that. Let's go back to Joseph Tainter's The Collapse of Complex Societies. And we're talking about the collapse of the Maya civilization in Central America. Although a great deal is known about Mayan agricultural production systems, little is known about crops actually grown. It has always been assumed that maize was the major crop, and indeed most archaeobotanical remains are of this plant. Bronson has suggested that the Maya grew root crops of various kinds, while Polston has argued for reliance on the nut yields of the Ramon tree. Archaeobotanical and this is a new one to me. Paleontological evidence definitely establishes the cultivation of maize, squash, avocado, cacao, cotton, and xanthosoma root. Classic Maya art suggests that the cultivation of Actis beersonomia and Psidium, which are fruit-bearing trees. Ramon is currently a famine food among the Maya. Palynological studies in the Petun suggest that in the classic period, agricultural practice involved a suite of techniques, each fitted to peculiar circumstances with differing levels of intensification and productivity. Wiseman suggests that with classic period population densities and forest clearing, the Maya would have had to maintain woodlots for firewood and production lots for the palm fronds needed for thatched roofs. Aspects of Mayan socio-political organization have been discussed previously. This is a topic that crosscuts all other facets of the Maya, but can be briefly isolated to characterize its nature. Mayan society was complex and highly stratified. The social order consisted minimally of a ruling class, a mid-level hierarchy of artisans and bureaucrats, and the peasants. In actuality, each of these classes was itself subdivided into appropriate gradations. Leadership was hereditary within descent groups from at least the first century BC, or possibly even as early as the Middle Pre-Classic. Rulers legitimized their reigns by erecting sculptural art that proclaimed ties to ancestors and deeds of conquest. The sculptures of Tikal offer an interesting glimpse into Mayan sociopolitical succession. In AD 378, Tikal was ruled by a man whose identifying glyph is today given the descriptive designation curl snout. Curl snout is shown in the ornament and dress of Teotihuacan, symbolizing linkages with that dominant highland power. The accession of stormy sky, son of curl snout, is associated with a burst of major new construction. Sometime later, in the period now known as the Late Classic, after a phase of leadership struggles, ruler A acceded to the throne. His possibly precarious position was buttressed in sculptural art by a conspicuous display of curl snout and stormy sky symbols. Such legitimization of rule by display of ancestral ties occurs elsewhere in Mayan art at stressful times, such as when a ruler's accomplishments were less than those of his ancestors and at the collapse. Sculptural and ceramic art portray a Maya elite concerned with alliances, royal marriages, conflict, hierarchical relationships, and political intrigue. Important persons visited distant centers to participate in the burial ceremonies of other elites, arranged marriages as vehicles of political aspiration, celebrated conquests, and generally engaged in the kinds of political maneuvering expectable in a complex society. The distribution of population and settlements across space reflects the political climate of the lowlands. The view of Mayan socio-spatial organization that has gained widest acceptance was developed by Bullard based on surveys in the Petun. The organization of settlement mirrored the organization of the society. At the apex of each polity was a major center, such as Tikal. Each major center established a dominance over a set of smaller minor centers that were characterized by lesser amounts of sculptural art and monumental architecture. Each minor center, in turn, administered and served as the political focus of a localized peasant population. There were regional and temporal variations in this idealized pattern, and since Bullard's work, finer details have emerged. Within centers, residential areas were segregated by status. Between centers, in some areas, the density of settlement declined. In other regions, the distribution of settlements is continuous. In southern Quintana Roo, for example, there are stretches of terrain 40 to 50 kilometers in length in which there is no gap of more than 100 meters between structures. Settlement nucleation increased through time as population aggregated into centers. This is particularly a characteristic of the late classic period. Significant numbers of people nevertheless still lived in rural areas between centers. Some rural areas, such as Barton Ramy in Belize and the central Petun Lakes, experienced continued dense settlement throughout the classic. It is possible that dominance hierarchies existed among major centers. Gordon Willey, as noted, has argued for the existence of a pan-southern lowland state headed by Tikal in the early classic. He notes that Tikal in this period founded dynasties at Quirigua and Copan and married its royal daughters to the rulers of other centers. In the late classic, this regional state broke down into a number of local polities, each headed by a dominant center, such as Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, Narajo, Palenque, Huachachilan. It should be pointed out that this model differs from the major center minor center hierarchy formulated by Bullard, for here the model is of hierarchies among major centers. Colbert interprets the glyphic evidence as indicating a domain for Tikal that extended for more than 100 kilometers in each direction. The hierarchy headed by Naranjo, or Tikal and Naranjo, included 6 subordinate centers, each with the same number of courtyards, with one exception. These are distributed in a manner suggesting that they were administrative centers. As might be expected, these hierarchies were not fixed. Political fortunes rose and fell Centers achieved dominance and declined. Allegiances and competitive relations changed. Marcus, who proposes that there were 4 regional capitals, noticed that their membership changed through time. A number of scholars, it should be noted, dissent from this reconstruction. Calgill suggests there is no evidence that any southern Maya center gained firm, long-term political or economic control over any large region, but that there is plenty of evidence of brief dominations, alliances, and royal marriages. Sanders makes the important observation that with relatively uniform productivity over large areas of the lowlands, there was no economic basis for any one center to achieve dominance over another. To this, it might be added that there was also no advantage to doing so. Complexity and its costly manifestations increased through time, reaching a peak in the late Classic. An altar de sacrificios, the size and extent of formal architecture, number of stelae, and amounts of elaborate pottery reached a peak between 613 and 771 AD. At the sites of Yaxchilan and Bonampak, the greatest quantities of sculptural art preceded the end of monumental construction by a relatively brief time. The greatest building period at Tikal was between 692 and 751 AD. Across the southern lowlands as a whole, 60% of all dated monuments were built in a period of 69 years, between 687 and 756 AD. At the same time, late Classic architecture shifted increasingly to secular functions, with proportionally more investment in those buildings that Mayan archaeologists have called palaces. Colbert suggests, based on this development, that there was increased importance of administrators and nobles. The increasing costliness of late Classic socio-political complexity is well illustrated in figures 25 and 26, which depict monument construction and occupation of centers through time. And I'll have more from Joseph Tanger's The Collapse of Complex Societies tomorrow. And oh, yes. Never let a crisis go to waste, right? This is from Snayana Farberov at the New York Post. Obama slammed as tone deaf for linking Uvalde massacre to George Floyd. George Floyd, well, I mean, he's the Black Jesus, right? Former President Barack Obama was hammered for what critics say was a tone-deaf post linking the deadly school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, to the second anniversary of George Floyd's murder. The former president shared the message on Twitter Wednesday in the wake of the massacre at Robb Elementary School that killed 19 children and 2 fourth-grade teachers. Quote, "As we grieve the children of Uvalde today, we should take time to recognize that 2 years have passed since the murder of George Floyd under the knee of a police officer. His killing stays with us all to this day, especially those who loved him," unquote. Yes, I'll remind you, if you've forgotten, that the mother of Floyd's, first 2 or 3 children, was watching television. He was long gone. Was watching television, and George Floyd, death of George Floyd. It's all death of George Floyd on Rolling News. And so mom called the kiddies into the room where the TV was. She said, "Do you know that man?" And they said, "No." And she said, "He's your father." Such a close family. Authorities in Texas, as they were identifying the victims of the slaughter and reckoning with its aftermath, some critics slammed Obama for invoking the death of Floyd, who was murdered, no, he wasn't, by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin during arrest on May 25th of 2020. Seth Dillon, the CEO of the right-wing news publication, the Babylon Bee, tweeted sarcastically, "It sucks those kids died, but remember George Floyd? He's the one I'm still thinking about." Signed, Barack Obama. Emmanuel Ricon, editor-at-large at the conservative Latino publication El Americain, wrote, "The families of more than 20 people, mostly children, killed yesterday do not deserve this disrespect." Barrington Martin II, a former congressional candidate from Georgia, bristled at Obama seemingly conflating the school shooting with Floyd's murder. Quote, "Those babies were truly innocent. He wasn't. Let's not put them in the same sentence of a man whose untimely death was used to unleash a summer's worth of chaos in the name of faux social justice." Jason Whitlock, the host of the right-wing podcast Fearless, a black man, by the way, issued a full-throated condemnation of Obama's remarks. Let's stand George Floyd on the dead bodies of slaughtered children. This is one of the worst tweets in history. Matt Walsh wrote simply, "What in God's name is wrong with you?" Matt Walsh further said, "George Floyd was a violent criminal lowlife hopped up on fentanyl. The fact that you would compare his death to the slaughter of 20 children is just incomprehensible. My God, you are a vile man." Well, it seems in this case that Barack Obama he wants to ride George Floyd's coattails. Barack Obama is a hollow man. He's always been a hollow man. Oh, what did he run on? Hope? Oh, hope and change and something like that with Soviet-style art. And then he showed up, and it's going to be just as it was before, only woker. And Wall Street's not going to be punished for their crimes because Wall Street is going to make me a very rich man after I leave the Oval Office. Speaking of vile men, this is from a Twitchy. Do you remember in 2020 when the fiery but mostly peaceful protests around the country unified people of every race and generation? Neither do we, but President Biden's lucky to be living in an alternate reality. Perhaps Biden actually believes this because he spent most of 2020 in a basement in Wilmington. This is a speech by Joe Biden, quote, "2 summers ago, in the middle of the pandemic, we saw protests across the nation, the likes of which we hadn't seen since the 1960s. They unified people of every race and generation." Does he really believe that? What was the result of the riots of the 1960s? Burned out cities, many of which have never recovered from this. Massive white flight, thereby no tax base for these cities, and the enormous growth of the suburbs as a result. And now these suburbs are turning out for various reasons to be unsupportable, actually. But no, it was a unifying moment where you turn on the TV and you see over 200 American cities being, sacked. And you thought, yes, I feel very unified at this moment. And, I feel like, Beavis, fire, fire, fire. Is that what unified people? Their love of fire? Could be. I know a lot of people love fire. And for more fatuity, again, we'll go back to Joe Biden. I've gotten to know George Floyd's family over the years. Have you now? Which family are we talking about, by the way? And I promised them that his name will not just become a hashtag. Today, I signed an executive order to deliver on that promise and enact the most significant police reform in decades. First, the executive order promotes accountability, creates a new national law enforcement accountability database, strengthens pattern and practice investigations, and mandates all federal agents wear and activate body cameras while on patrol. Second, the executive order raises standards. It bans chokeholds, restricts no-knock entries, and tightens use of force policies to emphasize de-escalation and the duty to intervene. Oh, yes, de-emphasize the duty to intervene. Well, we saw that in Uvalde, Texas, didn't we? So it seems that the police are ahead of Biden on this one. And there is an article by Demicia Inman in Vibe.com. President Biden signs George Floyd Justice and Policing Act 2 years after Floyd's murder. I'm looking at it. Someone wearing a T-shirt with that man's hideously ugly face. And you're naming acts after this man now. Maybe if he brought a real $20 bill to that grocery store, or maybe if he decided that, he didn't need cigarettes or gum or whatever, if he didn't have the $20, he couldn't have it, then he'd still be alive today. Breitbart is all over the fiasco in Uvalde. DPS reveals Uvalde shooter entered through unlocked door, no armed police school officer on site. And what turns out to be shocking is that the police weren't the people who brought this to an end. It was the Border Patrol. Apparently, the Border Patrol, there's some men with some guts there and some sense of honor. They were so disgusted by these tack cops just sitting on their hands for an hour while a maniac was killing children that they decided they had to intervene. This is from Tommy Christopher at Mediaite. Watch, Texas police spokesman on live TV confirmed cops went in for their own kids during Uvalde shooting. Texas Department of Public Safety spokesman Lieutenant Christopher Olivares confirmed to a reporter during a live shot that police officers went into Robb Elementary School to get their own children during the massacre, amid outrage over reports that frantic families who complained about police inaction during the massacre were held back by police. A clip of a live interview with Olivares from Tuesday has gone viral. Yeah, I suppose it would go viral. Yeah, I'm a cop. I can get my own kids out. Sauf qui peut. For the rest of you, kiddies, save yourself if you can. Yes, this is from ADV America. Sorry, ADN America. Strange squiggly logo. How elite Border Patrol units took down Uvalde school shooter Salvador Ramos. This is by Joshua Shin. The Border Patrol agents that stormed the Robb Elementary School classroom where the mass shooter had barricaded himself were members of an elite tactical Border Patrol unit stationed in Uvalde, reports the Wall Street Journal. Without hesitation, the Border Patrol agents put themselves between the shooter and students to end the bloodshed and administer medical aid. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said in a statement, their heroism saved lives. The Border Patrol Tactical Unit, or BORTAC for short, is a unit of about 240 people who take on Customs and Border Patrol's most dangerous works, like tracking human smuggling networks and raiding suspected smuggler safe houses. The SWAT-like unit is trained in small unit tactics, advanced weapon skills, and other components of military special operations. BORTAC is based in Del Rio, but a small number were stationed with the 150 or so CBP agents assigned to Uvalde, about 1 hour to the east. Those agents heard a call on local police radio Tuesday about the school shooting. The shooter, identified as 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, had locked himself in a room after encountering 3 police officers at Robb Elementary. The BORTAC agents drove quickly to the school and donned their tactical gear, helmets, vests, and shields they stowed with their cars. About 80 Border Patrol agents total responded to the call and rushed to the school. The unit could not force themselves on the classroom due to its steel door and cinder block construction, so they got a master key from the school principal, according to law enforcement officials. Ramos fired upon the 3 BORTAC agents who entered, said the WSJ source. One was injured while another was protected by his tactical shield. The third shot and killed the suspect. Again, I don't write this stuff. I just read it. Inside, authorities found dead children in piles. According to the Wall Street Journal, a total of 19 children and 2 teachers have died. The Wall Street Journal notes that Border Patrol agents often respond to all nearby emergencies, even if they are not related to the border. For example, a CBP were among the first to respond to the 2019 mass shooting at an El Paso Walmart. This is from the New York Post. Lee Brown. Distressing videos show parents begging cops to stop Texas school shooting, and they were tased and they were shackled and arrested and the like. Because who are you to tell the cops what their job is? Isn't your job to save people from a madman who's killing them in a school? No, our job is to secure the perimeter. Cops accidentally got child shot while trying to stop Texas shooter, according to a student. This is from Khalida Rahman at Newsweek. Now, of course, if you're going into a situation like that, well, it's very fluid, and unfortunate things are going to happen. This is from the Post-Millennial. Mother trying to save children in Uvalde was handcuffed by federal marshals. The police were doing nothing. They were just standing outside the fence. They weren't going in there or running anywhere, the mother of two said. Angeli Rose Gomez drove 40 miles to the school upon hearing the shooting, and she arrived and said the police were doing nothing. While state officials said the police were at the school mere moments after the teen gunman entered the school, barricading himself in a classroom and opening fire on young students, they also said that officers were unable to gain access to the classroom. Did this school have windows, say, that could be broken and entered? I mean, I don't know. I'm just assuming. I'm just assuming that, steel doors, yes, cinder block construction. I'm assuming that there were ways in. And of course, there's a lot of talk about motivation and the like. Well, we're seeing more and more of these school shootings, or there's just generally what's called senseless crimes. I am not surprised at all, and I fully expect that we're going to see more and more, and then more and more of them. Because what we consider to be society has pretty much fallen apart, certainly from a traditional point of view. It's all about choice now. It's all about letting the kiddies do what they want, finding their bliss and the like. And if their bliss insists on getting stoned every day and playing video games, well, that, what's his name? Harari, the big brain Israeli who thinks that most people are useless eaters. That is actually his vision of the future, is that these useless eaters, we can't kill them. Well, not yet anyway. So we're just going to feed them drugs and video games. From what I have seen of mass shooters, drugs and video games are not a good combination. Someone on Twitter called @MW2VoiceChat writes, "Now young mass shootings are the zenith of every weird internet subculture, from trannies to fetishes to image board meme racism. People with no sense of self being swallowed whole by this stuff, best evidenced by the Buffalo Shooters Manifesto." You can't really save someone like that because there is no someone. There's nothing there really, just a vessel for nonsense. The solution would require filling a void that America has actively decided does not exist in the first place. Well put, I will say. I touched on this issue, I don't know, 20 years ago in a piece that I wrote about, gay marriage. Specifically, marriage has been wrecked. So, gay marriage is obviously a burlesque and a contradiction in terms, but why not? The piece is called "Why Save the Nuclear Family? It merely supplies docile workers for the servile state, and its doom was sealed 200 years ago." After the French Revolution had nationalized marriage and unfettered divorce, Sir Walter Scott thundered, if fiends had set out to deliver the most efficient way of destroying whatever is venerable, graceful, or permanent in domestic life, they could not have invented a more effectual plan than the degradation of marriage into a state of mere occasional cohabitation or licensed concubinage. It took most of 2 centuries to develop, but licensed concubinage is what marriage has devolved into: sterile, brief, incompanionate unions disconnected from the past and uninterested in the future. Now, homosexuals who think in similar terms want to be licensed too. Well, why not? And then I take a look at the history of marriage before and after the Protestant Reformation. Alan Carlson, who was the president of the Howard Center at the time, had something quite interesting to say about this with regard to Martin Luther. Martin Luther assumed that those who ruled the state would be governed by Christian principles regarding marriage and a whole lot of other things. What emerged for a while was pretty much that. I continued, however, the state, not just the Jacobin and Bolshevik states, has long sought to make the family serve its end. In his landmark 1977 study, Haven in a Heartless World, the Family Besieged, the late sociologist Christopher Lasch observed, by the end of the 19th century, American newspapers and magazines brimmed with speculation about the crisis of marriage and the family. Four developments gave rise to a steadily growing alarm: the rising divorce rate, the falling birth rate among the better sort of people, the changing position of women, and the so-called revolution in morals. Between 1870 and 1920, the number of divorces increased 15-fold. By 1924, 1 out of every 7 marriages ended in divorce, and there was no reason to think that the trend toward more and more frequent divorce would reverse itself. I wrote that Lasch was not a believer, a Christian believer, but he understood that the family's proper purpose is not providing workers for the managerial state. He wrote, quote, "The history of modern society is the assumption of social control over activities once left to individuals or their families. During the first stage of the Industrial Revolution, capitalists took production out of the household and collectivized it under their own supervision in the factory. They then proceeded to appropriate the workers' skills and technical knowledge by means of so-called scientific management, and to bring these skills together under managerial direction. Finally, they extended their control over the workers' private life as well, as doctors, psychiatrists, teachers, child guidance experts, officers of the juvenile courts, and other specialists began to supervise childbearing, formerly the business of the family," unquote. Lasch was among the first to understand the symbiotic relationship of capitalism and feminism. Feminists want women out of the house because they want to free them. Capitalists want them out because they lower wages. Feminists fought the traditional family because it was patriarchal. Capitalists fought it because it was not prepared to forsake its neighborhoods and communities for higher wages. The nuclear family we recognize today performs none of the functions of the traditional family. These functions have been assumed by the welfare state or by business. Kinship networks have, for all practical purposes, ceased to exist among Western families. Some immigrants managed to maintain them for more than one generation. Most children do not know their grandparents intimately, and cousins have ceased to matter. In any event, couples do not require and increasingly reject marriage. Following Europe, Canada now recognizes no practical distinction between legal and common law couples. Common law couples now claim all the rights and bear all the responsibilities of married couples, whether they want them or not, or even whether or not they are in a sexual relationship. The destruction of the traditional family was long the goal of the therapeutic professions. The cleverer among them realized, however, that marriage could be emptied of meaning over time. Carlson explains that the clever Swedes devised companionate marriage as a substitute. The companionate marriage, which comprises the vast majority of unions in the West, is based on romantic love, friendship, sexual attraction, or common interests. The purpose of the union is the individual happiness of each man and woman, or soon enough, man and man, or woman and woman. It is strictly nuclear. Children can be added if desired. One is not obliged to raise them. Nevertheless, couples prefer contraception and abortion instead. Romantic love ends, sexual attraction fades, and friendship and common interests are weak bonds in crisis. So companionate marriage may be dissolved as often as necessary. The welfare state succors single moms and chivies deadbeat dads. Social commentator Edward Luttwak noted several years ago that the West is engaged in an experiment unprecedented in human history: people without families. In 1977, Christopher Lasch found the early evidence discouraging. Quote, "It is precisely the separation of love and discipline associated with communal forms of childbearing that encourages the development of personality traits more compatible with totalitarian regimes than with democracy. A strong attachment to the peer group, a marked fear of being alone, more or less complete alienation from the past, a strong concern with personal authenticity in relations with others, unmediated by conventional forms of politeness, or even by respect for the other person's individuality, and a lack of introspection and of a highly developed inner life, unquote. The road to Columbine started here. And I suppose we can look at Columbine as a kind of turning point, if you will. So, two young men, two high school men, decide to shoot up their school because of some nonsense to do with cliques. Oh, they wore, greatcoats. They wore coats that went down to their ankles, and they drank cream soda. I'm not making this up. This is one of the ways in which they differentiated themselves, because they drank cream soda. This is from Hannah Nightingale at the Post-Millennial. And do we want to hear a really stupid response to Uvalde? Well, I'm going to give it to you whether you want to hear it or not. On Wednesday, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went on a rant on Instagram talking in reference to the Robb Elementary School shooting in Uvalde, Texas, that resulted in the death of 19 children and 2 adults. Following her speaking about how those in the seats of power in Congress should not be making decisions by default and how people should not be taking money from the National Rifle Association, Ocasio-Cortez said, "So there's of course a political issue that we have here, but then there's also a very deep cultural issue that we have. We have the radicalization of young men. This is an issue." Hang on. Young women are not doing this. Young non-binary people are not doing this. Are you assuming Ramos's gender, AOC? Trans people are not doing this. This is an issue that we have. And young men are being radicalized right now in ways that we have not seen, and we need to talk about that. Ocasio-Cortez went on to note that the leaders of various social media platforms are men. Boo! I mean, and who's in charge of all these platforms that are perpetuating this misinformation and violence? Men. Mark Zuckerberg, where you at, bro? Where are you at? 4chan, Reddit, what's up? Because all these little things that they're talking about when they say free speech, they don't actually mean it, because then they don't at all protect all speech. They do draw a line at some point, unquote. This is a direct quotation. I just want you to understand that. The whole bit is like, where are you at? What's up? Etc. That's a direct quotation. And here's more. But people like Mark Zuckerberg got busy having dinner with Tucker Carlson, who's also airing little great replacement theories that are inciting violence. And he's platforming the very people that mass shooters are citing in their own very clearly written manifestos. She continued. Ocasio-Cortez later told the viewers to check on the men in your life, but continued on to express sentiments against men. I will point out that in this latest mass shooting, it was a Mexican man who killed a bunch of Mexicans, but guess who's responsible? White people. We just have magic powers. This is from AOC. But this is a crisis of young man. It manifests in different ways, but we need mentorship. We need our strong male, like healthy male role models, like out there mentoring our young men. We really need it, because if our healthy, strong role models aren't having those relationships, and like check on the men in your life, seriously, because it just feels like there's very few like role models and examples of people talking about this in healthy ways. And it's a big problem, because there's a lot of crises. And especially as we try to evolve out of a world that is predatory on women, gay, non-binary, and trans people, because traditional regressive, patriarchal values really create men's identity and relation, create like men's identity and uplift men's identity in relation to other things, in relation to like how women treat them, how much stuff they have, etc. And when, for a very long period of time, we've been taught that trans and non-binary and women are less than, as they say, in oppressive societies, equality feels like oppression. And so I think there are a lot of structures that are having identity crises right now, because there is progress towards equality. But there is such a thing as healthy masculinity that is not rooted in the subjugation of other people, and that other people's full personhood does not detract from that, unquote. In another segment of the nearly 1 hour long video, Ocasio-Cortez said that the idea that mental illness has a factor to play in these mass shootings needs to be dispensed. Quote, let us dispense with this myth of mental illness. Okay, after this pandemic, millions of people have struggled with mental illness of some kind, whatever it is, depression, anxiety, bipolar, mental illnesses that are less presenting to mental illnesses that are more presenting this. This is not about that. This is about a trained, cohesive ideology of hatred and violence, whether it is explicit white supremacy that we saw in Buffalo, or whether it was simply the silos that young men radicalized in themselves online for whatever reason, using whatever pretenses, unquote. Again, this sounds like the ravings of a lunatic. Those are direct quotations from what AOC had to say. Let's go back to the chat. The Right Honorable says the leftoids want to treat us all as potential serial killers. Ogan's Iron, hello, says, LOL, anyone remember the Good Men Project? I think I do. Wasn't this football based? Didn't the coach at some team in Colorado, I may be confusing this with this other men's initiative. It was rather embarrassing for him when his, 18, 19-year-old daughter got knocked out by a black football player. This person holds the same rank as Seneca, says Jogakin, a six. Jay Boss says, wonderfully coherent thoughts. One would have thought that, given how much, how often AOC speaks and at such length, that she would have gotten better at it. But she hasn't. It's just, it's stream of consciousness. It's entirely stream of consciousness. Ogan's Iron says, was some horrible site about feminist men as role models. Quachalango says, I think everywhere is below 2.1 replacement in civilized world. Yes. A congresswoman we deserve, though, says Gamian. Is Elon Musk right that we will face dangerous replacement numbers in the future? I don't think so. It's been the actual decline of the population is presented as a catastrophe. What was pointed out to me on Twitter today, that the population of Japan today, even after one of the lowest TFRs in the world, is still something like, well, let's say it's substantially higher than it was during the Second World War. But no, there are other costs. When people disdain the procreation, what is the purpose of marriage then? I mean this seriously. And I was talking about companionate marriage, which is a real thing that the Swedish sociologists developed. And as we've discovered, companionate marriage is, it's not much cop, Oh, I'm bored. I need to discover myself. A lot of women say this now. And depending on how you interpret the data, anywhere from 2/3 to 90% of divorces are initiated by women now, often for reasons that not that long ago would have been considered, well, frivolous. If the purpose of marriage is to make you the best person you can be, and you come to the conclusion this marriage is not making you the best person you can be, well, then why not blow it up? Quachalango says, my favorite theater kid is KMG. That may be the greatest compliment I've ever had. People are using the word literal to describe things that are not literal, says Tarot Destroyer. Okay. Ogan's Iron, the northerner in Europe, the further north that go in Europe, the more progressive inherently the people seem to be. That's from Jay Boss. Eric Harris was simply a psychopath. Yeah, but how did he get that way? Okay. How did he get that way? Again, this quest for authenticity that Christopher Lasch identified, what? Oh, more than 40 years ago. The quest for authenticity. I mean, what does that mean? Oh, I have to be authentic to myself. Oh, it means you have to have tattoos like everyone else, and you have to have an asymmetrical haircut and have big discs stuck in your ears, or mutilate your body in various ways, or claim to suffer from all manner of mental illnesses because that's the only way in which you can feel authentic, or mutilate your body sexually because this is the only way you can feel authentic. This is, this is inciting the Gadarene swine to, go over the cliff. Who else? Ogan's Iron says KMG in Quebec, the civil code still differentiates significantly between marriage and common law cohabitation. Progressives trying hard to change that. Well, no, as well, and certainly in the rest of Canada, essentially there is no difference at all in terms of rights, benefits, obligations, and the tax code. Put useless eaters in Club Med for life, says strategically adaptive memeplex. Yeah, I want to talk about more about this shooting because Peter Hitchens has been going on and on about this for years, and no one is paying attention. Drugs. Now, I disagree with him slightly. These Muslim terrorists, yeah, they were driven mad by drugs. Okay, but what do these people do when they're when they're driven mad by drugs? Attacking, say, white people, specifically as white people, or attacking Jews, killing Jews specifically because they're Jews, suggests, again, a predisposition towards certain acts. This is by James Varney of Real Clear Investigations, the ADL murder report that cried white supremacists. In May 2020, two members of the Family Values, a white supremacist prison gang, allegedly killed a member of the rival Southwest Honkies prison gang. These are pretty lame prison gang names, aren't they? Over a long-standing beef. 3 months later, a New Jersey man who had vandalized synagogues and distributed neo-Nazi pamphlets strangled his wife. On the surface, the crimes would appear to have little more in common than their brutality, but the Anti-Defamation League includes these murders by white men of other whites in its tally of right-wing and white supremacist murders in its report, Murder and Extremism in the United States in 2021. Quote, in 2021, white supremacists were responsible for more murders than any other type of extremist. In many years, they comprised an outright majority of the extremist murders that year. Indeed, over the past 10 years, white supremacists have committed 244, that is to say 55%, of the 443 killings that the ADL has documented, unquote. The ADL also claims that other right-wing extremists were responsible for another 20% of extremist killings during the 10-year period, 2012 to 21, including those it describes as anti-government and incel/manosphere, typically involuntarily celibates or misogynists. Do you know how many of these incels are actually not white or, Asian, say? A very large number of them, and a very large number of these Asian incels harbor murderous feelings about their Asian women. Why can't I get a girlfriend? Why are all these Asian women hooking up with white men? Now, obviously, this is far more complicated than the ADL wants to admit, but the ADL makes bank by making things as simple as possible. The ADL report has been cited repeatedly in media pieces as evidence of the lethal threat posed by far-right extremists since a mentally disturbed 18-year-old white supremacist murdered 10 African Americans and injured 3 others at a Buffalo market on May the 14th. Its stark warning has helped provide a backdrop for the narrative advanced by the White House, advocacy groups, and national media outlets that toxic white nationalism permeates American society. Yes, and again, as we've seen, when a Mexican boy murders a bunch of Mexican children, this is also an example of toxic white nationalism. President Biden said in his speech in Buffalo, white supremacy is a poison. It's a poison running through the body politic, and it's been allowed to grow and fester right before our eyes. Yes, that's why white America is being replaced by non-white foreigners, because white people are just so powerful in America. Or that is to say, of course, white people are still powerful in America. They still run America, but they don't run America for anyone other than people just like them. The middle class has to be destroyed. But a closer examination of the statistics compiled by the ADL, which did not respond to multiple requests for comment, cast doubt on their use as evidence that African Americans or any other Americans are under increasing or serious threats from racist white zealots. The report was publicized in a month of back-to-back massacres by mentally disturbed young men, the latest by a member of a heavily Hispanic community in Texas, suggesting mass killings defy pat analysis. Yes, indeed. Critics cite significant problems with the ADL presentation. Like other organizations tracking extremism, the ADL rarely offers context to claims regarding extremist murders by comparing them to broader homicide statistics. During the same 10-year period cited by the ADL in its 2021 report, citing 244 murders by white supremacists, there are at least 165,000 murders in the U.S., meaning those the group attributes to white supremacists accounted for 0.001% of such violent deaths in that decade. That statistic pales in comparison with those of major cities that have seen shocking increases in bloodshed, with recent annual murder totals breaking or near-breaking records set in the 20th century. Chicago had 797 murders in 2021, the highest total in 25 years, while much smaller Minneapolis, 1 year after George Floyd died in police custody there, had 96 murders, one shy of the city's 1995 records. Huge jumps in murders also occurred in Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and other metropolitan areas. Well, excuse me, this is what we've been reduced to. When black people kill black people, it's not an issue. It's guns. Guns have agency, and evil guns did this. When black people kill white people, we're not going to talk about that because that never happens. Well, actually, it does. And proportionally, black people kill white people far more than white people kill black people. Far, far more likely. But when white people kill black people, this is really the only crime that matters. This is such a slap in the face, to the families, to black families whose lives have been ruined by truly senseless violence. Dozens of rounds being shot in every direction, and some little kid, looking through a window gets shot to death, which happens alarmingly often in the United States. But no. Let's not talk about that. That's not relevant because it was a black person killing another black person. I don't know. I can say that what we've been reduced to in this regard sickens me. And I just wonder how long it's going to be before I continue to be sickened by this. Because when people choose to be mad, what can we do about it? What can we do about it? Anyway, I think I'm going to end with this. And I was talking about the CBC blatantly rewriting a story for political reasons. And this is from Alex Berenson at his Substack, Unreported Truths. Urgent, the New York Times has edited out its reference to Salvador Ramos's cannabis use. The Times' main story on the Uvalde shooting as of approximately 5 p.m. yesterday. Earlier this month, Ramos started picking fights with coworkers again and bragging about quitting his job, saying he no longer needed the money. He told her, a coworker, and others, that he was going to act out in a big way and that they would all hear about it. Ms. Rodriguez recalled that the shooter would often talk about how much he despised his mother and grandmother, whom he told her did not let him smoke weed or do what he wanted. And we have other stories about this fellow. He lost some video game. He was playing video game online. He threatened to kill people because of this. Again, contra big brain Harari, video games and marijuana are not a good combination. So the relevant sentence, co-workers who were bigger than him. And Ms. Rodriguez recalled that he would often talk about how much he despised his mother and grandmother, whom he told her did not let him smoke weed or do what he wanted. The Times' main story now. See if you can find a reference to smoking weed now. No, Look harder. It's gone. It's gone. Presumably, the New York Times thought that this connection between a mass shooter and marijuana would be offensive to its readers, or presumably offensive to a group that was powerful. Berenson concludes cannabis causes psychosis. Psychosis causes violence. The great American cannabis legalization project is collapsing. Violence is exploding, and the first cities to legalize and commercial retailers cannot compete with low-priced, unregulated cannabis and are already asking for bailouts. All the Times can do is hide the truth. Well, I've been saying for years that there's a political reason for the legalization of marijuana, and it is urban pacification. That when you got people hopped up on Goofenthal, yeah, just as long as I keep getting my Goofenthal and maybe I have my video games, then I don't care about politics. Yeah, things are getting crummier and crummier and crummier, but I'm so zoned out that even if I wanted to do something about it, I couldn't. But there's a certain type of marijuana user that pushes through the fog. Maybe you've heard the famous statement about, weed smokers melting into the furniture, right? That the natural reaction is to nod out. But there's a certain type of user, and this is associated mostly, well, you see it in Jamaica, you see it in black communities, where if you fight off the very strong temptation to nod out, you find it makes you, in a way, kind of superior, impervious to things. It enables you to become a berserker, to use a Viking term. So I remain persuaded that marijuana legalization is urban pacification, but there are going to be some people who can't be pacified. And again, sadly, as I said a while ago, we're going to see more and more, and then more and more of this, because as McLuhan reminded us, violence is the quest for identity. And when people feel that they do not have an identity, then they're capable of anything. Hello to God Squad, a new name to me, who says don't smoke vegetation. J. Boss says KMG, one could argue the pacification effect has already existed with alcohol, except that the violent component is in alcohol but not in weed. I would disagree with that. And I'll tell you the difference. Increasingly, we're seeing people, and it's not just marijuana, it's antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety drugs, where people are not straight ever. We're seeing more and more people who are smoking all day long or swallowing the gummies or the like. Alcohol is an on and off kind of thing. You drink, maybe you get drunk, and then you wake up the next morning with a hangover, and that's it. Okay? You're back to normal. But increasingly, marijuana users are seeking a steady state of intoxication. Ogan's Iron says possibly some racial differences in Africa. It is associated with wild berserker-like violence. And I mentioned Jamaica specifically in that context. Of course, if we were interested in pacification, maybe the governments shouldn't have decided that that I have to spend $17.50 to buy a pack of cigarettes now. I mean, they banned cigarettes from prisons. I mean, this is a really easy way of keeping people docile. Hey, be nice and we'll let you have cigarettes, But no, tobacco does not derange people, and drugs do. But, so we're going to strive hard. Apparently, New Zealand wants to eliminate tobacco entirely. I would argue that's a very stupid thing to do, because when you look at the people, like, say, out on the street, as I do, and I mean the street, I mean the mean streets, these people are never happier than when they have a cigarette to smoke. When they don't have cigarettes to smoke, they are quite unhappy. God Squad says marijuana is the toughest natural fiber known. It's yeah, I know about all that. Yes. Hemp. Yes, the miracle of hemp. We can organize for messaging and lobbying just like they do, says strategically adaptive memeplex. Hey, I'm going to wrap this up now, but I'll just mention, I don't know, about an hour before the show started, I went out for a cigarette and I was walking along Douglas Street. And I don't know how many times this has happened this year. 10, 12. I was nearly flattened by a bicyclist on the sidewalk. Many of them have mountain bikes, racing bikes, that sort of thing. They pedal very, very fast. And I'm normally not accustomed to constantly swiveling my head behind me to see whether I'm about to be flattened by a bicyclist. And I don't necessarily keep an exactly straight line when I'm walking down the sidewalk. And this guy, he came so close to me, and then he muttered something afterwards. And I swore foully at him. I'm almost at the point now where I'm going to get a broom handle and I'm going to cut it in half, which would serve two purposes. One, if I'm lucky enough, to jam it through the spokes of their bicycles or to whack them over the head. The police seem to take no interest in this, which is now ubiquitous. Bicyclists, electric bikes, electric scooters, and the like. And hey, I'm on the sidewalk. I'm not walking in the street. I should be, pretty safe walking in the sidewalk. Not anymore. And I know some bicyclists are responsible in this regard. And the city of Victoria, where I live, has spent a small fortune on bike paths for these people, but they insist on riding on the sidewalks. And I pretty much reached my limit. So, Jogakin666 says, pro commenter man says bicyclists have a vendetta against men born in 1955. Jogakin666 says, didn't the Maori smoke cannabis, or did they smoke coconuts or something? Well, you know where the word assassin comes from, right? It comes from hashish. That this was a Shiite sect in the Middle Ages, would smoke copious amounts of hashish in order to work themselves into a murderous berserker frenzy. The Right Honorable says, get a 6-foot-long stick and just say you're using it for social distancing. I might do that. Enron says, Kevin, ready to go full Sonny Corleone. I hate sharing hiking trails with cyclists, says strategic adaptive memeplex. As a daily cyclist, I blame the bike, not the rider, says Brandon Smith. You'll have to pacify them with benzos, says a strategically adapted memeplex. Yeah, but look at Jordan Peterson. Did you see his tweet about returning to Twitter? Oh, that he's going to be curated now, and they're not going to let him see the responses or whatever. And I really thought that I read this tweet and I thought, was this dictated to him by his physician or possibly his mother? So cringe. So very cringe. Fentanyl is cheaper than tobacco, says Brandon Smith. That's not a good thing. That is very much not a good thing. But again, as someone pointed out, oh, monkeypox. Oh, my God, monkeypox. Don't blame the gays. Well, the gays are a protected class. They're an exalted class. The whole alphabet people are exalted class. These pathetic people ruining their lives with drugs, it's pretty clear the state wants them to die and wants them to die as quickly as possible. Is it, could not some of them be reclaimed? We're not interested in that. Do you know how much money this costs? And then they relapse or whatever, Let's just give them the drugs so they die. I mean, how can they deny this any longer? Matt Beck says the essential difference between alcohol and every other intoxicant is that alcohol is metabolized by the body as a food. You actually derive nourishment from it. That is true. That is absolutely true. And some people derive too much nourishment from it, hence the phrase beer belly. Pro commenter man says, at night in my unlit neighborhood, people dressed in black push baby strollers on the street, even though there are sidewalks on both sides. When I read about the gentle giant, you remember him? And there he was in Ferguson, Missouri, walking down the middle of the street, a highway really. And I thought, yeah, okay, this is, right-wing satire. They're really pushing the edge here because people don't walk on the highway. And then I found out it was true for the gentle giant, but it is broadly true. And yeah, so there was a recalibration that took place within me after learning that. So that's it for today. I shall be back on the air tomorrow, which is Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to make a donation to the KMG show, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. And if you're in Canada, donations to the live stream may be made directly via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this: in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.